does what a spider can.
Welcome to the Now. I'm Ashley.
I'm John.
We had the opportunity to get early copies of Spider-Man. Thanks, Sony. And
Yeah, we did.
PlayStation. That was pretty dope. Although you didn't even need it, you ordered a Spider-Man PlayStation 4, right?
Yeah. So I also have a copy of the game coming that. Who wants a copy of Spider-Man?
You can pay that right on forward. But because we got a chance to play it early, we have had the opportunity to form some opinions on it and let you know what we think of the game. We can just go through some of the nitty-gritty details in as spoiler-free a manner as possible.
Yeah, no spoilers.
And we're coming at this from slightly different perspectives. I think you're a longtime comic nerd.
Yeah, since I was 8 years old.
And you've been massively into Spider-Man for a really long time. I like Spider-Man, but I'm not really immersed in the entire comic scene. So a lot of what I know about Spider-Man has been the
Tobey Maguire's taught you, and then Andrew Garfield taught you, and now Tom Holland is teaching you.
They're all teaching me, yes. But so it's a lot of that osmosis.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of the villains and all that sort of stuff, but a lot of it is just indirect.
Yeah.
So that's the direction that I've been approaching it from. But I did play Sunset Overdrive on Xbox One, which is the game that Insomniac worked on before this, and absolutely loved Sunset Overdrive. So I was really looking forward to what Insomniac might do with that formula, but in the Spider-Man universe.
Okay.
So really stoked about it. Why don't we dig in? First of all, let's just go over all the basics.
Yeah. About the game?
Yes.
Okay, so the game is basically it is what it's advertised as, that open world game that you're in New York City and you can travel basically anywhere. It's a pretty big map.
It's
pretty big.
The entire island of Manhattan.
Yeah.
And it has all been replicated in excruciating detail.
Yeah, and all the whole city's broken down into chunks, and the chunks have events that happened into them, and then each chunk of the map has also almost like Assassin's Creed like watch points for you to unlock that allow you to see the whole area a lot more as far as your map, and then that allows you to see the plethora of collectibles that build this game.
There are a lot of collectibles in this game.
There's obviously a central narrative storyline for you to follow, and that keeps progressing as you keep doing those. But there are collectibles, and then you progress in the game, and it unlocks more collectibles. And then that happens about 5 more times in the first hour of playing, where you just unlock these different kinds of collectibles that all are things that as you complete them, and depending on how well you complete them, you get little tokens. Those tokens are then used for gear, for your suits, for abilities. The suits are good.
The suits are great.
I'm going to say
really
the suits are good. I got so excited, comic book fan, when Spider-Man 2099 suit opened up, the dark blue and red one with the claws and the very striking mask. I had that, and I kept that suit on for quite a while. But every once in a while, I always had to switch myself back to like the white spider suit because it's just a really good looking suit.
It's a great suit.
I keep Googling because it hasn't come up yet, but I need someone to release his shoes, and I need to buy his shoes because I like the Spider-Man shoes in this game. They're so good.
I really dig all the different kind of suits. So there's the white spider is the one that we see mostly in the trailers and everything. That's his main suit for this game. But there are all kinds of nods. There's the 2099.
I just unlocked the Spider-Man Infinity War one.
Yeah, the Iron Spider is great. It's even got the 4 legs on it. So each suit, when you unlock it, has an ability that comes with it.
Suit power.
Although, suit power. Not every suit necessarily has one, but
almost all of them.
Most of them do. You unlock the suit, it will automatically unlock the suit ability.
And that's a power gauge that goes up as you fight, and then you can use that ability. And sometimes it's like, oh, your focus meter will keep filling up over and over again, which you use to do finishing moves and get health.
Or you can electrify everything.
Or you can play a giant guitar and emit a ring of sound energy.
That one's pretty great.
Punk Spider-Man's pretty good.
There's also, though, once you unlock a suit, you have that suit power, and you can start to mix and match. So you can take the 2099 suit, but then you can have the Iron Spider, the power for it. So that's pretty fun as well.
Yeah. It's the game has a central storyline that you play through, and it involves, the whole like Mr. Negative thing that they, talked about in the trailers and everything like that. And you interact with a bunch of characters like, Mary Jane and Aunt May and Harry Osborn and all of them. And What else is there to before overview?
Well, so this isn't an origin story at this point, and I think
I don't understand exactly where this is playing. It's an alternate reality, obviously.
This is not part of the MCU.
This is not part of 616,
No.
which is the comic book term for the main canonical world that we all follow. Nor is it following the MCU. It's its own. And it even starts off at a point where apparently a bunch of stuff has happened in his past involving like interactions with other characters and Harry Osborn's in some place. Sorry, he interacts more with Norman Osborn, but Harry Osborn's someplace, and his relationship with Mary Jane is a different place. And Aunt May is working at this shelter, and that's a whole new thing. And he himself like is working with the police, which is a whole thing that's not entirely true always in the comics. And so it's its own story, which kind of is a little nice because I think some of the fatigue that can come with some of these known IPs is an origin story we already know and a storyline that we've already played through so many times or seen on screen so many times.
No, this one is a lot of fun. Where you start in the game, you're Peter Parker, you've been Spider-Man for about 8 years, so you've already defeated a bunch of different villains. You defeated Scorpion, you defeated Rhino.
Yeah, a lot of people are already in the Raft, which is the maximum
yes.
security prison for the super villains.
Yes, so they're all locked up, and you are going about your day.
Jay Jonah's a radio podcaster.
Still your biggest fan.
Yeah.
And the game starts with you essentially taking on Fisk, Kingpin.
Yes.
And that's really where it opens up. You as you said, your Aunt May is working at a shelter called Feast, doing as much good as she can. You have broken up with Mary Jane, who is now working for the Daily Bugle and is doing a journalist. Also a lot of fun. She does have some playable time in the game, which for me helped really drive home the difference between being a normal person and between being Spider-Man, which is not to say that Mary Jane doesn't do great things during her segments, but they are grounded. There's not a bunch of like flipping and twisting and crazy fighting. It's much more problem solving and stealth.
Am I allowed to give my opinion?
Yeah, that's what this whole thing is about.
I hated the Mary
Really?
Jane stuff. It was the worst part of the game. Every time I had to play her, I was mad.
Why?
Well, one, I didn't like their Mary Jane at all. The voice actress didn't really care for her performance. The even design they gave her, it's not a very good Mary Jane version. These are all very different versions of the looks of people. Like Norman Osborn looks very different, and even Peter himself looks very different. So the design of her I didn't like. The story they did with her was this whole like annoying Lois Lane. Like she was annoying Lois Lane is what she was.
I see.
And so I didn't like her. And then they kept making me play her, and every time I had to play her, it was this slow version of the fast game I was playing that involved me just crawling around and hiding behind like cabinets and then waiting for guards to turn around and then crawling around a little further. And then maybe later on in the game they gave you like a gadget to use that like distracts the guards, and then it's like I'm still just crawling around. I hated it. You had to do it so many times every time you did it, and there's no point in it too, because it was often Peter would call up Mary Jane and be like, hey, what's up, girl? And she's like, I'm in trouble. He's like, hey, why are you in trouble? Flashback, go to Mary Jane, have to like play through why she's in trouble. And so I'm like, I don't, just tell me why she's in trouble and let me keep playing as Spider-Man. I don't want to play as Mary Jane anymore. It's annoying.
All right, so we have different opinions
Yes.
on that one. I liked that it drove home the contrast.
Your opinion of why you liked it makes total sense, and that actually, I'm glad that means that there will be people that will play it, and that won't ruin the game for them at all. It didn't ruin the game for me, but it did like. It was just like these like annoying commercial breaks is what it was. It was like I was watching my show and then ads come in. I'm like, I don't want to watch ads. I want to watch Spider-Man.
Fair. There's also so you spend a lot of time traversing the city in this game.
You do a lot.
You're swinging all over the place. And one of the things that I really liked about the city that they've built is all of the Marvel nods that have been built into it.
Yeah.
Not necessarily MCU stuff, but there is an Avengers Tower.
There's Avengers Tower.
You start off at the Fisk
Wakandan
Tower.
Embassy.
The Sanctum Sanctorum. At one point, I
Bonus
took
points for knowing that.
Thank you. I took some photos of Alias Investigations. Josie's Bar At
Oh, is
one
that
point,
like Josie's Pussycats? Kind of?
No. It's Josie's Bar from. It's in Hell's Kitchen. It's from.
Oh, that's right.
Daredevil.
Daredevil. You're right.
And on that note,
Oh,
you
so that's
also
a nod
have
to
a
the
business
okay.
card from Daredevil as well.
Yeah,
It's like
there's-
this lawyer gave me a card. Wait a minute, how did he know that I was Spider-Man?
Yeah.
He's blind.
Yeah.
Like, that sort of like fun.
There's a
little
lot of nods.
thing. And most of the nods that I saw are things that people who are familiar with the MCU would recognize.
Sure.
And just because that does make it friendlier, they're not the same as MCU,
Yeah.
but they are names you'd be like, I know that's a thing,
Yeah.
which is nice. The big thing for this game, really the most important thing, is the gameplay. So why don't we dig into the gameplay? Okay, so it's an open world action adventure traversal-based collectathon with a really rad story.
It's extremely Arkham series-esque game.
It is.
The combat is very similar. It's very gadget-based fighting as well that aids you in your actual hand-to-hand melee combat. There's a lot of aerial action. There's way more vertical possibilities than when in the Arkham games because Spider-Man has that going for him. But as far as like controls and the fights and combos and that kind of thing, if you like those kinds of games, you will like this game. Most people like those games. I think you're going to like this game. And it's definitely a combat system that rewards you the more you learn it and the more that you keep your playthrough like varietous. Don't just smash square over and over and over again. Learn to dodge, learn to jump, learn when to switch into a different kind of web ability, learn when to use your suit power, and use that all, especially later on in the game. There's these like demon sites that you have to clear out. Demon is the name of a gang in the game, and you will fight through like 80 guys. Like that's probably why I didn't get through the entire story, but there's those kinds of things where you have to fight a ton of guys, and if you don't keep your like fighting combat up in different ways, you'll just keep dying.
It's also important to learn more than the button mashing because the different enemies have different sort of move resistances. So you may, for example, encounter an enemy with a shield.
Yeah.
Now, eventually, you can unlock an ability to take the shield away from them.
That's still something you have to do.
That point, up until that point, you have to avoid them, dodge them, get them off balance, and then you can hit them from behind. There are other melee enemies who, if you have to knock them up in the air, otherwise they'll block most of your melee attacks. There are other enemies where if you're in the air, they are going to use one of their weirdo whip weapons and they're going to yank you down. So you have to be aware of the types of enemies in the field and near you and adjust your gameplay accordingly, which is
fun.
Cool. There are also different
like
factions. There's the demon gang. There are various thug gangs. And there is also the sable gangs. So they all have
Sable security, but
Sable security. But they're just a gang with like a contract. Anyway, they so those guys, for example, have very heavy firepower, and so you have to get really good at avoidance. And trying to draw enemies off into a corner where you can.
A lot of times we find you're like, all right, I need
some.
some space, and you just jump up and just need to swing like 50 feet away just to have them walk towards you.
Regroup, pull them towards you. So you do have to adjust your gameplay for that, whereas a lot of the demon gangs are working with different shields, different weapons, so you have to be really nimble in adjusting your gameplay accordingly and doing it quite quickly. And then the thugs are sort of they're a powerhouse, but they're the most basic that you're gonna encounter.
There's also an entire stealth component to the game that, again, very much like Arkham games, where the longer that you can stay hidden and just take out guys one by one using different takedown moves and perch moves and web moves, then your fight later will be a lot easier and you won't have to fight so many people. So there's a whole stealth thing, which normally in games can get, for me, like, I just want to jump in and fight. I loved it in this game. It was super fun, especially as you learn how much that can help you. So you get pretty creative in staying stealthy and distracting guys, and that kind of thing. So I like the whole stealth component of the game.
It also doesn't feel too slow when you're being stealthy. That can be a drawback with a lot of stealth-based games, is you have to sit back and wait for a long period of time. Because Spider-Man is very nimble and can move around very quickly, you can get to these different points up above the enemies and try to move to the most advantageous point to pick them off one by one. And that doesn't take ages, it takes seconds.
No, traversal is super fast in this. There's a few times, because there are so many combinations of the buttons that you're using on your controller for his like dozens of web moves, including traversal to combat. There's a lot of times where I was like, all right, I'm gonna swing to that lamppost, and instead I hit the button to immediately attack the guy down below me, and I ruin my whole stealth thing. Because there's just like, there's like, okay, if I hit L2 and then R1, that'll shoot the web, but if I hit L2 and R2, I will fly to another spot. But if I hit L, it's all these little tiny little things that, as your brain is thinking through too many button combinations, you'll fuck up because you're me.
It does take a little bit to get used to, because there are a lot of combinations and a lot of different moves.
It scales.
And there's also a big difference between hitting the square button for an attack and holding the square button to knock him into the air.
Yeah, or holding a button and moving your joystick so that it then pulls someone. So there's like all kinds of combinations you can do stuff.
Yeah, or if you dodge and you're next to a wall, you'll dodge onto the wall.
Yeah.
There's a lot of little sort of some context-sensitive things, and then a couple things that do take some getting used to, but you also have plenty of opportunities to get into combat pretty much whenever you want to.
Yeah.
As you're traversing around the city, a crime will just pop up, and you can go in, intervene. You want to do that because you earn tokens for that, which you can then spend on different abilities or different suits or different mods or different gadgets. So that's one of the more valuable tokens that you can get. You'll be wanting a lot of those if you want to unlock everything. So you have tons of incentive to get into fights. Also, among the different collectibles, you can take on missions for Harry Osborn that are basically city improvement things, and they may take the form of swinging through clouds of smog to identify a substance that's in them, or it may involve hunting down and turning off a bunch of air conditioners, or it may involve vaccinating pigeons. All kinds of crazy different things that a lot of them are very traversal oriented.
Chasing pigeons sucks in this game. Pigeons
There's an
are
entire
OP
pigeon currency.
in Spider-Man. They are OP. They can fly better than I can swing.
Yeah, I'll just say that I've never actually seen a pigeon fly that fast or that nimbly, but they're jerks. These are super pigeons for sure.
God. And then to catch you have to be using buttons to be swinging and making your way around, but then to catch the pigeons, then it's a 2-button combo that you have to take your fingers off everything that you're using to actually swing and just hope that you're gonna catch that goddamn pigeon. I hate the pigeons in this game.
They're not that bad.
They're terrible.
There are also, you get different types of tokens for infiltrating different types of bases.
Yeah.
So there's the Sable bases, there's the Fisk bases, and then there are the Demon bases, and you have different opportunities to clear through those. And in addition to just clearing them, there are bonus challenges that if you complete those while doing it.
I couldn't not do the bonuses.
I will say, just a friendly heads up on that one. It is way easier if you come back to those later once you're a little bit more powered up.
Yeah.
Or once you have additional abilities. Because you come back to some of those, and the ones that in the beginning of the game seem like there's no way you could get all of those.
Yeah.
That's impossible. It becomes much easier.
There's a 65 hit combo one, and I loved that one, but it took me a few tries.
Yeah, so there's, they may
65 hits is a lot of hits without getting hit.
They may involve a 65 hit combo, or webbing enemies to walls, or doing a certain number of air throws. And so really they just challenge you to play in a slightly different and more challenging way.
And then they reward you with bonus tokens.
Yes, which you can then spend on all the other stuff, all the different upgrades.
To get all the pretty suits.
Exactly. The suits are fun. The suits themselves are cosmetic. The powers that come with them do have more of an impact on your stats.
Yeah, there's an electric punch one that's super helpful.
It's great. So the collecting really does tie into the overall gameplay, as opposed to just being like, hey, you want this for achievements. It does have an impact on what you can do, and it makes the game, as you advance through the story, a lot easier if you take the time to do that.
Oh, yeah.
But on the flip side, some of those do get easier if you go through and then come back to them. So balancing that is fun. There are also side missions. So in addition to the story missions, you can do these sort of like side quests that are scattered around the city. They're a lot of fun. They similarly will challenge you to either navigate through some stealth sections and get something, or stop a heist, or stop a vehicle that's speeding through the city, and so on. So there are a lot of really cool side missions. Those tend to take on different parts as well. So you may have a 3-parter. There's one like, hey, I think my boyfriend's cheating on me. Oh no, wait, it's this, and now I have to stop this thing. So there are a bunch of those different types of missions you can do in addition, and those are really good for leveling up. You get a lot of good stuff for those. Also, you'll find one of the things that can be a challenge if you are trying to focus on advancing through the story is there's so much to do all the time.
Yep.
There is guaranteed a collectible near you. There's a backpack that you can,
or a landmark to take a photo of.
Yeah, or a base, or there's
I'll tell you one thing
crime that will pop up.
What this game does really well.
It's really easy to get distracted.
Yes. And this probably aids in distraction, but also aids in if you're someone who's a completionist, that makes you feel better about this, is that the game makes it very accessible to find the things around you to do. You have this whole scan feature that not only shows you the points of where these things are, like a backpack is, or where a construction site is that you can fight, but also these giant pillars of light that go into the sky where that spot is, so you can see it in the whole distance of the city. And also at the same time, your map in your menu feature has a list of everything as far as like what is still needing to be collected in this section of the city.
Yeah, it breaks it down by neighborhood.
You will never be going like, okay, I know I still need this many backpacks. Do I need this many backpacks in this spot or in this spot? It's like, no, it's like you've got 3 out of 5 here. You've also stopped 4 out of 5 thug crimes, and you've gotten 2 out of 5 landmark photos. And so you can go, and then you can hit your scan feature and find the ones you're missing. So if you're a completionist, this will not be one where you'll be searching for stuff in order to get it. Like, there will be no like, where's the goddamn last backpack? Where is it? It's like, you'll know where it is and be able to do it. And so that's what I will be doing soon after this, because I need to complete this game because I really want to.
Yeah, I think this one is going to be 100%er for me. Although some of the challenges are going to be difficult to get all the best scores on. Some of them.
The challenge token things that you have to do, because there's a whole challenge thing later on where you have to like get to a certain amount of bombs to defuse them, or have to follow this drone and travel through little things that the drone drops along the way. And those actually rate you between, bronze, silver to gold, and gold's really hard.
Gold is very, very hard.
I may be doing everything but
I've done that on one challenge so far. So that is the one that is going to be probably the most difficult to perfect. So I thought the bases were going to be difficult.
No.
Coming back to the bases later on, that's not really a problem. So, but it is the kind of game where if you don't feel like rushing through the story, you'll be rewarded for it, because there is tons of stuff to do, swinging around the city, having a nice time. If you do want to go through the story, that is where you'll get most of your experience and leveling up quickly. So it will at least get you to a point where you can complete everything, but you'll have an easier time if you don't rush through it. Speaking of which, let's talk a little bit more about the storyline. All right, so mentioned this in the overview, but you start off, it's not an origin story. You've been Spider-Man. You know what you're doing. You have quit your job at the Daily Bugle, and you now work in a lab working on cool inventions and everything. We'll keep the details of a lot of this to a minimum, by the way, because a lot of what's really cool about this is just experiencing the story. However, you still have a relationship to some degree, at least on speaking terms, with Mary Jane Watson, who you are no longer dating. You broke up. She's now a journalist for the Daily Bugle, and so she's the one who's working on breaking stories and all that sort of stuff. It seems like it's probably a much better paper now that Jonah Jameson has moved on to his radio show. He will be in your ear the whole time, doing his radio show, talking about whether Spider-Man's a threat or a menace. You can tell very clearly how he feels about the whole thing. Meanwhile, your Aunt May is volunteering at a shelter, trying to do the best she can. In fact, I really enjoyed the early introduction to the shelter, one of the first things you do in the game is stop a mugging and encourage the homeless person that you save from this mugging to just take the help that's needed, because everyone needs help sometimes, and go to the shelter. And so then you actually meet up.
That's right. It's a young
with
kid.
her, there later, and that was pretty great. I actually really liked talking to her there as well, because he also forgets that she doesn't know she's met him before, and so some of the interactions there are really cool, and it's nice just like seeing the people there interact, like people playing chess, having their own little stories, being able to help out, and it just, for me, drives home Peter Parker's focus on trying to do good in small ways
very
to
altruistic.
help. Yes, in trying to do the greatest good possible.
The surprising amount of the story of this game doesn't involve you going through, villain to villain to villain of like these classic Spider-Man rogues gallery people. In fact, a good 2/3 of the game at the beginning is you just dealing with this one central storyline, and it doesn't involve like, okay, now I'm fighting Rhino, okay, now I'm fighting Scorpion. It's like, no, you're going through this storyline that's happening, and there are boss segments that are bigger than other ones, but it's definitely not like rogues gallery type gameplay, which is nice because we've done that. Let's do something new. There's some high points as far as like story time and performance and capture and everything like that. And then there's some low points for me as far as like, I think one of the worst, I don't know if it's in the mocap or in the performer's job, like how he did it, but the worst person in the game is Peter Parker. Like when it cuts to the non-Spider-Man moments and it's him, like him and how his face emotes and how they use him to carry the scene versus him standing next to Aunt May or Norman Osborn or even Miles Morales is so poor compared to the other people. For some reason, like they gave him a really weird looking design to his character, and also his performance is very flat. For me, it was one of my biggest gripes in the game. When he's in his suit, he looks great in his suit, and in his suit, he often has some pretty good dialogue. He deals with this police officer, Yuri Watanabe, who's also great and really fun to talk to, and she's a great snarky cop, and they have this great interaction involving Spider Cop that is just adorable. But I have some big gripes about like what's going on with the whole Peter Parker performance and that kind of thing. I don't know. I might have read into that way too much. What do you think?
I agree that he is much stronger as Spider-Man, just as a character, which is interesting since you aren't seeing face and emotes and everything like that. But I feel like overall, the voice performance is fine, but he does seem a little bit more flat. He's
very mopey. When he's not in Spider-Man, he's very like doughy-eyed, concerned look on his face constantly because he's dealing with some stuff, but it's like, this is Spider-Man. Can we like even like Tom Holland, like to compare it to another performance, is able to balance between being the lighthearted Spider-Man and giving us dramatic moments, but like I need a little bit more of a dynamic to his performance because it just wasn't there for me, and I really had a problem with it throughout the majority of the game. It got better near the end game, but the first half of the game I really didn't like Peter Parker, which was kind of a bummer.
Yeah, no, I didn't mind him, but I didn't feel like he was as interesting just in his daily, like going about his day, doing his job, helping out a little bit. You're right, he's not super exciting, but it also, you get the excitement when he puts on the mask, and it almost seems like that's when he becomes who he is.
Sure. Miles' performance is fantastic. As far as like the animation capture of his performance and even the voice actor's performance, like it's great. It's so good.
Yeah, I think a lot of the characters do a great job of driving through their storylines. Miles is great to see in the game. I didn't mind Mary Jane. I get why you wouldn't be into that sort of interpretation of her character, but I liked her fine. I liked that she didn't want to be a damsel in distress just because she's normal, that she wanted to be self-reliant and that she wants to do what she can. I really like Aunt May.
I loved Aunt May.
Aunt May is great.
Aunt May can be very annoying depending on how they portray her. She can be like the nagging, frail grandma character, or she can be this very independent and nurturing like kind of foundational character for Spider-Man.
Which is what I feel like she is in this particular story.
I loved Aunt May in this one.
No, she's great. You can see where Peter Parker gets a lot of his character.
Yeah. Norman Osborn's also a great character in as well.
He is. So in this game, he is the mayor.
He's the mayor, still in charge of Oscorp, but also is the mayor of New York City.
Yes. And so he's doing some, potentially corrupt things in terms of like...
He's doing Norman Osborn stuff.
Favoring his own tech and, getting it installed throughout the city, to his own profit.
Hiring private security details.
Exactly. So, like bringing in Sable to manage security.
Army.
Yeah, and do all that sort of stuff. But I feel like his involvement in the storyline is really cool. A lot of what you focus on early on is the story of Mr. Negative and his obsession with Osborn, which puts you in an interesting place as for Peter Parker as a character. That sort of conflict of I need to do the right thing, but I really don't like this guy.
Yeah.
But I have to do it anyway because it's the right thing to do. And so like him sort of pushing into that territory, I really, really like. So I think that they handle a lot of that stuff well. I don't want to talk really about later story stuff because I think a lot of it is meant to be experienced, but that's all, all of that stuff you learn in the early portion of the game. So that's all pretty exciting. Another thing that's important about this game, because you do spend a lot of time swinging about, looking at things, is the graphics and sound, so we should probably dig into that a little bit.
That's important.
There's been recently a lot of concerns about Puddlegate. So there was a screenshot that went around that showed that was from the E3 build of the game, and then a more recent screenshot from the same location that seemed to show a graphical downgrade.
Yeah.
The Insomniac's response was, it's a different time of day, and we just removed some of the water from the puddles, but nothing's been changed.
The whole game is 2D. The entire game is 2D.
It turns out it's actually a side-scroller. Yes. But there are multiple times of the day which do really impact how the city looks. There's daytime where everything's bright, a lot more reflective. You get sunset, which is things tend to get a little bit flatter, a lot more shadowy. And then there's nighttime where everything is like quite dark, but you get all the city lights, so it's never really dark.
I didn't, and I didn't spend a ton of time just sitting there and walking around the city looking for like imperfections or stuff like that. Like you spend a lot of the game definitely at a fast pace, speed. But graphics were good for me. It's there's some low points of like how some of the webbing looks at some points. It's kind of looking like webbing is a very complex object to get as far as like particles and texture and like that. There are some times where it's like, we had to like cut corners on this moment. But for the most part, for a console of this generation, I was playing on a PlayStation. I was not playing on a on a Pro, but I was on a pretty good TV it looked pretty beautiful to me, and I didn't notice anything like that as far as like how the graphics looked or how it performed or anything like that.
I would say that the game looks at its best when you're speeding through the city. It looks best at high speed.
Yeah.
You do get like a lot of like blurring effects as the city goes by, as you're leaping from street lamp to street lamp.
Yeah.
That all looks really great. Once you slow down, if you are walking along the street, which you can absolutely do, some of the smaller details do show, like, background characters, they're not super detailed. Yeah. And if you stop to look too close at some of that stuff, some of those little details aren't as strong as others. I think overall, the city and the buildings all look really great. And
best comparison I could say would be like GTA 5, where GTA 5, when you're going through Los Santos and you're going at a high speed, looks beautiful. If you're up above it and looking at a big old landscape, looks great. If you get super close up in GTA 5, you really see like, these giant open world games can't, have a million details. GTA 5 might have some better graphics, oddly enough, especially if you're playing on PC than this. But it's very similar that there are, I'd say it's not 100% the most groundbreaking visual game, but there are going to be times where you will turn around and you'll be looking at the city at a certain angle and the sun's at a certain angle and you're like, oh wow, this is very picturesque right now. And it's almost like that whole thing where you can almost take a photo of that moment and have a pretty little wallpaper from just that.
Which is good since they're doing a photo mode.
I did figure out one place where they the graphics don't go very well, which makes sense. It's the water. So the entire city is,
if you accidentally get yourself stuck in the water, which you did.
Yeah, it's the island of Manhattan. So you're like, there's a point where you get to, there's water, even the Hudson River. And I realized that I could just swing my guy out way far. And I was like, what happens if you just fall in the water? And he just falls in the water and he sits there and you have to kind of like either swim back or you can jump and swing back and that kind of thing. But like, there's definitely not a lot of really good water physics. It's all just kind of like the waves are moving, and as I move, the water doesn't change around me. It doesn't really not affected by me. So it's definitely like not a part of the game that I intended you to be experiencing very much. But that's fine with me because it's Spider-Man. I'm going to be up in the buildings and that kind of thing.
You don't want to be in the water.
But I had to see, so I just dropped my guy as far as possible in the water. I was like, okay, that's what happened.
Well, let's not do that again.
It's a pretty beautiful game. I'll say that. Like, I don't think it's the most beautiful game I've ever seen in my life, but it's nice.
Also, the animation is noteworthy. I think Spider-Man is very well animated. Always looks at ease swinging through the city. There are, as you transition from swinging to running along the side of a wall, whatever, the bridging animations, like either like doing a leap or doing a spin or doing a somersault and diving, all of that stuff looks really, really great. Mm-hmm. Also in combat, the animations seem really, like for the most part, really fluid. There are a couple of just very brief occasions in the game where I'd be doing something and it seemed like he just went from one sort of animation sequence into a different animation sequence with no real bridge there, which can happen if you make a sudden left turn into something that the game wasn't necessarily expecting you to do, and it has difficulty making that switch. But that was also very rare, not really noticeable, and that was mostly during traversal where I'd be like, oh, whoop, didn't mean to do that.
Yeah.
But in combat, doing like the flips and the dodges and everything feels great.
Very visually satisfying.
And the finishing moves as well look awesome.
Yeah, very, and the finishing moves with the visual mixed with like the rumble pack on your controller is it's just a very satisfying moment. But,
most of that animation is absolutely focused on Spider-Man. I don't think the enemies that you're fighting don't necessarily stand out animation-wise. Some of the bosses that you fight are very, very cool, but the focus is on how great Spider-Man looks at all times, which he absolutely does. So I think that is good. The sound overall, I feel like it sounds. You get basically like audio alerts when there's a crime in the area. There are a lot of ambient sounds. You drop down, walk around the city, and someone will shout out like, "Oh, hey, can I get a picture?" Or like, "Oh, hold on, pose like this because I wanted if this is gonna be great on my Instagram, whatever." But basically, the different characters will talk to you. So there's those fine little details as well.
The music is fine but repetitive. It's like, oh, you've got some pretty well composed themes here that are going to be popping up, when I start traversing. I know I'm out of coffee as well, and I'm sad. You start, traveling through the city, and a theme comes in that's your like I'm traveling stuff, and then there's your combat music, and then there's stuff like that. I don't think it's necessarily going to be a game that I'll be pulling up the soundtrack and listening to. There are other games that are much more fun to listen to as far as the soundtrack goes, and because there's a lot of repetition in this game. There's a lot of repetition of the same music. And so it does get a little less enjoyable as far as like, the music that swells, that gets me going is just like, okay, I've heard this like 30 times in the last half hour.
Yeah, although I do feel like for the most part for me, the music is sort of like almost like a background, like mood setter.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it fades into the background for me, and I don't necessarily notice the music, which isn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's just a sort of almost a subconscious cue about what I'm involved in at a given moment.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I can go, okay, this means that I'm now out of combat.
It's very Doom-esque, where Yeah, it tells you like, oh, you're in a mode where you're traveling now, or oh, you're in a mode you're combat. But unlike Doom, the music is not as good. Doom's got a really good soundtrack.
No, the music is perfectly serviceable. It does have the Marvel-y, comic-y feel to it, and enjoyable. Not a standout, but also it's not something I have too much of a problem with. Final thing that we should talk about, I think, just really quickly, maybe we can compare some notes, is technical performance.
Yeah.
Right, so on the note of technical performance, one thing that I did notice just very occasionally is because the game is trying to render so many buildings and so many different things sort of all at once, is just the occasional jaggies along the edges of buildings. Or if you're rotating, it might go like this a little bit. The edges have a little bit of
it was rare, but it happened.
And keep in mind that this was on a PS4 Pro as well. So that's just the game. That's not necessarily like between the two different versions. But for the most part, I didn't notice any frame rate slowdowns.
No, I never had any frame rate slowdowns. Load times were pretty okay. As far as like when you transition into a building or into an event or into a cinematic, and considering this is open world and you can travel blocks at a time via your webbing, and also go from being at the top of a skyscraper to down at the bottom and involving yourself in a fight immediately, the game is keeping track of the city pretty well without making you stop or having really any interruptions at all.
Agreed. And overall, pretty polished too. I didn't encounter any bugs where I get stuck inside of something.
I had no bugs.
Or anything like that.
Not that the game can have bugs, but I had none.
No, one or two minor clipping issues, and I had one very minor bug that also could be fixed. There is a day one patch. We are playing it without the day one patch because that will be out day one.
Yeah.
But where there was an interactive point, and I would go in to interact with it, but the thing wasn't there to actually interact with.
Interesting.
So there was just this interact icon here, and then that was it. But that is like on the scale of the kind of bugs that I would expect to have in open world games, being like
possible.
Somewhere up here, it's way down here
Yeah.
as far as issues. Overall, I think they did a great job.
It's a working game. It's easily
is
sayable. It's a working game that you should be able to jump right in and not experience anything that will break your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So, final thoughts. What do you think?
Final thoughts is it's generally good. It's I don't think it's the most not that a game needs to be the most mind blowing thing, but it's pretty great. But I don't think it's something that beyond playing it this one time through, I'll probably jump back in and play it again. Like a year down the line. I don't think it has a ton of replayability. I'm excited about DLC already because I'm like, okay, when I'm almost done with the story and all the collectibles and everything like that, I want more. And so, yeah, it delivered I think exactly what it said it was going to deliver. I think Insomniac did a very good job of controlling the conversation of what they were putting out there, showing us what trailers and what demos they wanted to show us. And in the end, they actually gave us the game they told us they were going to give us, and it worked. So, in this day and age of video games, it's like, wow, you guys did it. You actually gave us a game that you said you're going to give, and it didn't need, me to buy a bunch of stuff to fix it. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it does feel like a complete game.
Yeah.
Right out of the gate. I don't feel playing it like anything's been chopped out to be sold back to me later. I feel like I'm getting the entire game. It does feel like what Insomniac promised. It's an open world action adventure game featuring Spider-Man, featuring a bunch of favorite Spider-Man villains. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of other great character cameos or references.
Yeah.
So it's very rich with all the Marvel nods, which is enjoyable if you've been following along with the Marvel's various new properties, which so many people have.
Yeah.
It plays great. If you played Sunset Overdrive on Xbox, this will give you an idea sort of how well Insomniac's done with traversal-based super fun games in the past. Mm-hmm. But I feel like where Sunset Overdrive fell down a little bit was leading you through a story, and I think that Spider-Man does that a lot better. I really enjoyed the story in this. I enjoyed the execution. I enjoyed the characters. Yeah, Peter Parker is flatter than Spider-Man, but you don't spend a ton of time Peter Parkering, and so it's a minor okay, but it's not that he's bad. He's just maybe not as standout as some of the other character performances or portrayals.
Yeah, it's just one of those games where it's like there are definitely a few things that keep it from being perfect, and that's completely normal and fine. And I think we should be able to critique games and point out like this was something that I wish they hadn't done, but for the most part, the game was still good. Like just because I didn't like that part, I still enjoyed the game a ton.
Yeah. One thing that got me a little bit just occasionally is there are some sequences, particularly in boss fights, where you get sort of like sidetracked either with QuickTime events, or where it'll cut into a cinematic part of the fight, and it shows some really cool stuff that you don't have any say in.
Yeah.
Which again, it's trying to tell a story, needs to get you from here to here. But because you spend so much time making the combat decisions, to have some of that taken away from you I'm like, I would have liked to do that. That would have been really cool.
It's also a little teachy at sometimes. You could feel that the game is really trying to keep its audience as broad as possible so that younger audience can play this game and that they will not get frustrated and not know what to do next, because the game, it's like, yes, I know I need to find the vent. Stop telling me to go find the vent. I know that's what I need to do. Like, this is the 20th time I broke into a building. Stop it.
And I know how to get to a vent.
Yeah.
I know how to bring up the crimes if I want to see them. It does keep a lot of those tutorials popping up sort of over and over and over, even if you've been playing the game for 20 hours.
Yeah.
And it's like, I know how to find things.
But I feel that's because they're definitely trying to make this accessible to a younger audience, because Spider-Man is an IP that younger audience will want to play, and so therefore that's gonna broaden their user base and get them to sell more games. So I totally get it.
Yeah. That said, really strong experience. I enjoyed it.
Yep.
I think that they have put together the game they promised.
Yeah.
The game that they sold us.
Yeah.
It's a polished, working, full game. And I had a lot of fun playing it.
That's my suggestion. Go buy it. It's fun.
And I don't 100% every game, but I want to 100% this one.
Yes,
which is saying something.
I'm
for
gonna.
me. All right, so definitely worth a play from me.
Yep.
Worth a play from you.
Worth a play for me.
All right.
Worth buying a console for.
Well, that's good. You say that because you did.
It was an excuse. It was an excuse to buy the console. It's not the only reason you should buy a console, but it was an excuse.
All right, so that's where our thoughts are on Spider-Man for PlayStation 4. It's coming out this Friday, September 7th. Let us know in the comments if any of this helped you decide whether or not you are planning on playing it.
Tell us your favorite suit. I like the Spider-Man Noir. It's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. People don't necessarily know their favorite suits yet.
But they've released a bunch. But once you play it, then tell us your favorite suit.
Yeah, then do that.
At
All right.
me, bro.
And for more reviews, discussions, we're going to be showing some more Spider-Man gameplay a little bit later this week when we're allowed to do so.
We can do a stream?
We can, either a stream or at the very least, like, we can do, like, a gameplay.
Okay.
Yeah, but there's just sort of, like, different sort of restrictions because they don't want things spoiled for people, which is totally understandable.
Yeah, it's very story-oriented. I get that. Yeah, good call.
Yeah, so we'll have more about Spider-Man coming up, and because we've had the chance to spend so much time with it as well, we'll have some tips if you're just starting out so you can sort of get ahead of the game a little bit. And so if you want to get all that, make sure that you like this video, you're subscribed to The Know, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Welcome to The Know. I'm Ashley.
I'm John.
And we have... I don't know. I'm once I get rolling, it's fine. I can't sometimes. It's early.
Take two.
I was up until 1 just doing video capture to be like, oh, we should get capture of this thing.
Oh, yeah.